Coming up, I'll tell you why the 2026 draft class is already drawing more buzz than last year's class and what superstar prospects could land with the Nets. All that and more after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's show, I'm going to be joined by an NBA draft analyst to outline the strengths of the 2026 draft class to you Nets fans. I'll outline what prospects are at the top of the draft, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what you guys should be looking out for throughout this coming college season. We got a very special guest joining the show now. It is Tyler Metcalf of the No Ceilings Locked On NBA Draft Show. And Tyler, we are here to intro the 2026 draft class to this Brooklyn Nets fan base that is just eager for the draft content year-round. Obviously, the Nets are going to have focuses. I touched last week with Corey Tulaba about the Nets 2025 draft class. They're going to have two focuses this coming season, obviously developing those guys, and then also presumably setting themselves up for a top pick in next year's draft. So what are your early impressions of this 2026 draft class at the top of the class, and how would you compare it, and how does it stack up to the 2025 class?
Yeah, and it's always draft season, and for some teams that even starts a little more aggressively earlier than for others. I think the top three are legit three guys who you want to build your franchise around, who could be all NBA guys down the road. And as the weeks go on, it might be closer to a top four, with Michael Brown Jr. from Louisville sneaking into that conversation. But the three with a bullet in the tier of their own, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, they all give a little bit of different stuff at different positions and all have that foundation and skill set and athleticism and IQ that you really want to build your franchise around. After those guys, unfortunately, it looks like there could be a pretty steep drop-off, or at least a lot of questions, where in this freshman class, it's like, oh man, who's going to be that fifth guy? I think Michael Brown is separating himself right now as that fourth guy of the group. But after that, it's like, there are a lot of question marks with this class, and it might be a draft a little more similar to the Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray draft, where we see a couple of returners really vault up and go in that top 10, top 5 range, which we don't typically see.
So do you expect that, it seems like every year now there's a heated tank race in the NBA because there are such good prospects at the top of the draft. Last year, it was very intense because you had a Cooper Flag type guy, but we heard last year that was one of the deeper drafts that analysts had covered in a while. When you look at this class with the way you just described it, do you anticipate it being even more heated of a tank race because of their, being a really strong top and then a little bit of a drop off, as you said?
Yeah, I could see it getting pretty ugly as the season goes on, and as competitive as some of the playoff seeding races will get, I'm sure some of the tanking races will match that in their enthusiasm, because and last year it's all about, can you get the number one pick? Now there's a lot of talent to be had after that with Ace and Trey and Dylan Harper, and there's a lot of intriguing talents, but it's pretty clear cut that Cooper Flag was the guy. And, he's the best college prospect that I've scouted, going back to Anthony Davis. And now we have three guys who could rival that. And I'm not saying they're better. There's a lot of basketball left to be played, a lot for these guys to show and prove. But coming into this season, if Cooper Flag, who is originally supposed to be in this class before he reclassified, it would have been a top four. And I think there would have been a lot of conversation and a lot of debate among all four of these guys. It would have been all four.
Yeah, we entered last season, talking about that draft class, and it seemed like there was a top three with Cooper, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. Obviously, a lot of questions about Ace. He kind of drops out. BJ Edgecombe comes in, but it seems like you're really high on the top of this 2026 draft class. So would you say you think that the top of this 2026 class is an even stronger group collectively than what we saw at the top of this past year's draft, which was also considered a very strong top of, a draft.
Yeah, I'm more excited about this top three than last year's top three. Like going into last season, I really liked Dylan Harper a lot. I really liked Ace Bailey a lot, and that's not to take away from them at all. And if we're expanding it to top four, I really like Trey Johnson this time last year and up until the draft. Similar vibes with Michael Brown, different players, but in terms of liking them at this stage, I would have Darren, Cam, AJ all ahead of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey at this point.
And it seems like, the Nets obviously didn't operate their tank the way a lot of fans had hoped last season. They fell to the 6th worst record and then fell to the 8th pick in the draft. And this year we've already seen, it seems like, sort of a course correction or them acknowledging that, they need to take a different process, because last year they entered the year with a veteran ball handler and Dennis Schroeder. They had guys like Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith. They obviously traded away DFS, and they traded Schroeder literally as soon as they could trade him. They were like, get out of here. Like, go to the West Coast. We don't need you anymore. And then this year they're entering with 3 rookie point guards, and they don't have a veteran ball handler on this roster unless you want to say Cam Thomas. And even him, there's some trouble in paradise, obviously, there. So it seems like they're set up for a much clearer cut tank. And hopefully, for some people, if you're in favor of the tank, that'll lend itself to getting better lottery odds than last year. But talking about these top 3 guys that you are so excited about, you have Darren Peterson right now as your top player in this draft class. And he is a 6'6" guard going to Kansas, just had a really dynamite season last year. So for Nets fans who haven't watched us, give us your quick summary of Darren Peterson and what makes him so special.
The way that he grew his senior year in high school, he's gotten to the point where it's like, I'm not sure there are necessarily any offensive weaknesses in his game right now. And going into his senior year, it's like, oh man, this guy's athleticism is awesome. He's super fluid. Just the way he moves on a court is different than basically anyone else. And he glides, he's explosive, he can decelerate, he's strong, he's physical. And going into his senior year, it's like, oh man, this dude's a bucket too. Like he can just get points whenever he wants. But it's like, all right, he's a scorer. That's what he is, and that's really exciting if we're talking in the 5 to 10 range. But you have to be able to do more. And this year, he was basically playing point guard for prolific prep and making really high level reads constantly. The way that his playmaking grew this year, it's like, holy crap! Like I still like him as a 2 guard long term. But now he's one of these guys where it's like, all right, yeah, that's more than just being able to attack a closeout and then kick out. It's all right, he can initiate the offense now. He can run numerous second side pick and rolls. He can push in transition. He doesn't have to give it up. The way that his playmaking, like long term, I think his playmaking and offensive creation role, I view it in the kind of Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards type of realm where you probably want another lead ball handler next to him. But at the end of the day, you don't really want to take the ball out of his hands almost ever, because he's a dynamic 3-level scorer. Shooting percentages aren't outlandish. They're not great. They need work. But I think a lot of that too is just the gravity that he demanded in high school and the difficult attempts. I'm over the moon about him.
And I got to watch Darren a little bit last season, but I've really dug into it this last month. And first, like things that stood out to me was just the size, the strength of, that he has as a ball handler and the natural fluidity of him as a mover. You said glider. I think that's a really good term to describe him. So those were just like boxes that are checked right off the bat. But then watching him more, the kind of, variety in the ways that he can create his shots and the different things that he does with the ball in his hands really just stood out to me. And he's clearly a guy who's dedicated to his craft, but it's almost like some of the things he was doing, which looked so creative and so amazing, almost just looked like second nature and so natural. The way that he, creates advantages downhill, the way that he scores around the hoop, the way that he can get to these little floaters, the touch that he has in the lane and around the basket, just all of that is so special. And then when you couple that with the playmaking and with, the, spot up shooting, off the dribble shooting, it's just like you said, like, it doesn't really seem like there's many weaknesses to this guy's game. You've been in the scouting business for a while. How does he stack up, against, the other guards that you've, profiled, dating back in your career?
He's up there. He's one of the most, it's rare that I'm this excited about a dynamic guard, like shooting guard coming into college. Because everything you were just talking about is spot on. And what really, really stands out to me is not just the scoring, not just the athleticism. We see guys like that all the time, but the way that he improvises and is composed under pressure and isn't predetermined with how he's attacking stuff and keeps his dribble alive despite getting blitzed out of the pick and roll or triple teamed off an offensive rebound. He's just always keeping his options open and never committing to a shot, a pass, a drive, anything until he has to, until the defense really forces him or alleviates something and offers him something, and he's just making the right play. And to be doing that this early in his career and to have grown that much as a ball handler, decision maker, playmaker, scorer, and having it all come together before he set foot on campus at Kansas is really, really special. So could it go up in flames and be an absolute disaster this year? Maybe. I'm not a huge fan of this Kansas roster, but everything that Darren Peterson showed in AAU and showcase events and high school this last year, it's really, really special.
It's tough to compare them because there are different positions and different types of players, and it also just is early. But is he in that Cooper Flagg conversation, you'd say, as level of prospect and, the urgency that some teams might have to get up there and try to maximize their chances at landing him?
Yeah, and I think NBA upside, I think he could get there. I think Cooper's all-around game was better than Peterson's right now because, I really like a lot of what Peterson does on defense. It's just not quite as consistent, whereas, Cooper was an insane defender throughout his high school career, and then we just saw the offense get better and better and better with the playmaking and the decision-making and facilitating, always kind of being there, and then we saw how much the shot improved and the scoring improved throughout his senior year and at Duke. So Peterson's almost the inverse of that, where the offense is holy crap, this is special. And we're getting flashes of the defensive stuff. If that gets really consistent too, then yeah, I think we're probably going to be talking about him in a similar vein.
We got two more prospects in this top three who could be potential home run picks for the Nets if they are lucky enough to land a pick at the top of the draft. Who are they? What can they bring to the table? We'll hit on all that when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Guys, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Guys, Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've ever put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Guys, you ever think you were saving a certain amount and then realize you're coming up well short? Monarch can identify why. It helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. It can help you maximize investments, increase your savings rate, and easily review finances with your partner and or financial advisor. It can help you keep a clear view of your financial health week to week and long term. Guys, don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, previewing the 2026 draft class with Tyler Metcalf of the No Ceilings and Locked On NBA Draft podcast. Tyler, we just hit on Darren Peterson, and you said this top three has you extremely excited. It seems like there's, some differing opinions on how to rank this group out after Peterson. Who do you have as number two on your board right now?
Currently, I have AJ DeBonsa, wing, small forward, however you want to classify him, headed to BYU. And it kind of varies by the day between him and Cam Boozer. Today, as of recording, I have AJ there because I really think he has the potential to be the best defender in this class. The way that his defense has grown over the last year is incredibly encouraging, and not just the fundamentals and the execution, but the attitude that he defends with, where it's he's enjoying shutting guys down. He's enjoying playing with some physicality, sliding his feet, cutting off drives, rotating from the weak side to get a block. And And for him to, if he really, really does commit to that end of the floor, then it's like the upside with him is tremendous. Because going into last year, I saw him at Hoop Summit back to back years as a junior. It's like, this dude is carrying himself like a superstar. He's hyping up teammates. He's awesome to be around. Looks super coachable, and the offensive stuff was out of control. And this year is like he's going through the motions. Is really disappointing. And the offense was just like, eh. But then, despite his kind of inconsistent motor on offense, it was always there on defense. And I'm like, what is going on with this dude? And it just felt a lot like senioritis, where a lot of the high school numbers and stuff with Utah Prep this year, they're okay. Like, he put up big numbers at times, but the tape looked lackluster, it looked sluggish, and it felt like is a guy who knew exactly where he was going next year and just trying to get through the season and was experimenting with stuff. It felt exactly like Paolo Banchero's senior year in high school looked. If he really hits, if the shot takes just a small improvement, there's so much playmaking, foul drawing, rim pressure stuff to go along with the defensive stuff. It's exactly what NBA teams dream about with a wing to build their franchise around.
Yeah, I just touched on it with Darren Peterson, but another guy, like even more so, Debansta. I mean, he's not handling the ball or doing the same primary creator stuff as Peterson, but just physically, like 6'9", crazy length, crazy athleticism. Defensively, looks like really fluid, mobile, like loose hips, can do all these things, slide his feet, stay with people. But I think it's interesting because you're not the only person I've heard say that about his offensive game. I've heard, other draft analysts talk about him and say they feel that he kind of plateaued this past season offensively. And then you just said the defense just reached another level. And in a weird way, like, you never want to hear about senioritis or a player getting complacent. Those can be huge red flags. But if you flashed what he can do offensively, albeit there's still questions there, if he had already flashed that and then he comes in and he just dominates defensively, does that almost give you a little more belief in the upside in terms of like a two-way versatility and the things that he could do on both ends?
It does a lot, because we know what he can do offensively. Like, when it's right, it looks incredible. Now the shot still needs a lot of work. Release point needs some work, needs to raise that up a little bit. He shoots a flat ball too often, a little late on his release at times, but those are fixable things. Is he ever going to be a 40+% three-point shooter? Probably not, but I'm not sure he needs to be. If he can get in that 35 to 37% on the volume and difficulty he's going to take, it'll be enough. But just doing that with mediocre defense, that's not the type of guy you want to take number one, because they're just going to be inefficiencies galore despite how talented he is. But if he's bringing that really high level elite defense to the table, and that's his baseline, now we're talking about all of the offensive stuff continuing to grow with the secondary playmaking and creation and the rim pressure. And he draws 1 billion fouls a game because of how crafty and physical he is. Now we're talking about a legit two-way star instead of just an offensive hub with a lot of inefficiencies and inconsistent defense. That guy doesn't get me as excited taking him 1, 2, or 3, but some offensive inefficiencies I can forgive if that defense is coming night in and night out, like I think it can and will.
And offensively, let's dig in a little bit more there. He's a guy who is a ridiculous shot maker, really tough shots, really, lethal in the mid-range. It seems like you said the 3-point shot needs some work there, but, kind of how do you, what archetype do you kind of place him in on the offensive end of the floor? Because he is this guy with huge size. Is he going to be able to handle primary creation responsibility, do you think? Is he going to be a little bit more off the ball? Just where do you see him fitting in college and then at the next level?
Yeah, I'm guessing in college they're going to let him go bonkers because they're giving him heck of a lot of money. Yeah. And I'm guessing we're going to see everything that he's got. If he wants to showcase it, he's going to have that opportunity. And BYU runs some really fun offensive stuff. So I'm expecting that they're going to put him in position to succeed a lot. Long term, the hope is that, if we're talking 99th percentile type of outcomes, the hope is that he turns into this generation's Tracy McGrady. A little more recent one, I've heard some Paul George comps. I think Franz Wagner should be in the conversation too, with how effective and crafty he is getting downhill, creating for others. That type of guy where he's a really smart passer and creator for others, but you don't want him necessarily leading the offense and initiating everything. But as that secondary guy, there's a ton of upside and then some shooting inconsistencies. AJ's a better shooter than Franz is, but it's still way off from being called a strength. But hopefully it's trending in the right direction.
And we see it in the modern NBA, like there's these wings who can scale up and scale down, can play, different spots. He just has this prototypical size at 6'9" with the length that he has, the strength that he has. And it's going to be really fun to watch him at BYU. Obviously, Nets fans are gaining some familiarity with Kevin Young and BYU and, what they did with Yegor Dioman last year. Last thing I want to touch on with Dembélé, because he's a guy who I think a lot of people probably had as the number one player last year leading up to this. Mm-hmm. And there are these questions, about his offensive game and plateauing and maybe a little bit of complacency. Have you heard anything behind the scenes about, just the type of kid he is, obviously has been in the spotlight for a while and, just like how he's conducting himself, anything that you've heard from, that regard?
Not really. 2 years ago when we saw him at Hoop Summit, super charismatic, just smile on his face the entire time, hyping up teammates and everything. This year, he wasn't a bad teammate or sluggish or anything, or like rude or a jerk or anything like that. But he just looked tired, and it's really important to remember with that event too. He just spent a week at McDonald's and then immediately flies out to Portland for Nike Hoop Summit, and then they're going to Team USA stuff shortly after that. So it's a long stretch. And is like, while we were out at Hoop Summit, every NBA person I talked to, or the vast majority, it'd be like, man, AJ's kind of dogging it, and he kind of looks rough this week, doesn't he? It's like, yeah, this kind of sucks. I'm like, yeah, is it affecting his stock for you at all? They're like, no, I still have a so it's like, okay, cool. Well, there we go. They're like, yeah, and it's a brutal stretch of the year for these guys. And everyone has good and bad days, so you always take it with a grain of salt. But I've never heard any intel wise like, oh, he's a bad kid, he's uncoachable or anything like that. Everything I've seen, the kid works really, really hard during practices and is willing to take criticism and feedback.
And one more thing, a player, Ace Bailey, a player that a lot of Nets fans watched for a while leading up to last year's draft, because there were questions like, you remember entering the college season last year, there were some people who were like, could Ace Bailey challenge Cooper Flagg for the number one pick? And then obviously he slides down. But these guys are, not different players, but similar size, similar archetype. Just like, how would you compare and contrast AJ Dembélé, let's say on the offensive end of the floor, to what Nets fans probably saw a lot of from Ace Bailey last season?
Yeah, I would say Ace is a significantly better shooter at this point. But AJ's ability to get downhill, his handle, the passing, intuition, is light years ahead of where Ace was. I think at this point, Ace was really intriguing, and the idea of him was awesome. I'm still very high on Ace long term, but I think AJ is just significantly farther along in being an all-around offensive weapon rather than just a scorer. And they're similar builds, but AJ's handles a lot tighter, and his willingness to initiate and accept contact and get to the line, get to the rim, draw fouls, get easy points that way. We never really saw that from Ace consistently, where he was way too eager to settle for mid-range fadeaways and pull-ups and that kind of stuff. Whereas instead, AJ will hit a guy with a shot fake, step through and get to the rim, or jump into him and draw a foul, rather than spin around and fade away going the other direction. He'll have plenty of that too. And, some of it will be hair pulling, like, just what are you doing? Why are you making this harder than you need to? But he gets a lot of really, really easy stuff because of how crafty and physical he is.
We have one more player rounding out this top three, and this just stacked top of this 2026 draft class. Cam Boozer, we'll touch on him, his strength, his weaknesses, what Nets fans should be watching out for this season. We close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. Guys, what I love most about these is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get the boost that you need when you need it. The flavors are delicious. They go down smooth. It reminds you of having just an easy drink in the morning that gives you that energy you need to carry through the day. The favorite flavor, the blueberry 5-hour energy shot, just delicious. It's refreshing and gives you that quick lift before a busy day. Guys, enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get you the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking with Tyler Metcalf of No Ceilings and the Locked On NBA Draft podcast. Tyler, we're going through this top three. Cam Boozer, a 6'9" forward, big man, going to Duke this season. Obviously, the name very high pedigree within NBA circles. What have you seen from Cam so far, and give us kind of your summary of him so far as a prospect?
He could very easily have the most boring 25, 12, and 6 average this year that we've ever seen from a freshman. All this dude does is dominate, put up big numbers, and win. It's not the sexiest film. It's not the flashiest stuff, but it's effective. It's simple. He takes what the defense gives him, and he's just already mastered doing the little things. Where it's like, yeah, I wish he had 4.5 blocks and 3 steals a game, but he doesn't, because he's just proactive in his rotations, his footwork, his fundamentals, being in the right place at the right time, doing the little things that don't require the flashy recovery plays or the flashy dunks. And he'll have some of that stuff, but he just plays really simple, takes what the defense gives him. And then even if they don't give him anything, then he utilizes that 6'9", 250-pound frame to go through them and create whatever he wants. He's just dominantly boring. And I don't mean that as an insult by any means. It's just where he is at this stage of his game, because he's just won everything, produces at an incredibly high level, and is just a lot of fun.
And you'd like to think that wouldn't be held against him. Among people like you who are professionals and do this for a living, I'm sure it won't be. And some, within NBA circles might even see that as a good thing. Do you think among fans, if Nets fans are to go to watch these three, do you think maybe there'll be less excitement surrounding a Cam Boozer just because of the way that he plays?
He'll definitely have the worst highlight tape of the three, but that's also because the other two are dynamic athletes and ball handlers who, are just flashier by nature. But then you go look at the numbers and the accolades, and it's like, oh, Cam's list, I'm flipping pages here, whereas the other guys have, 1, maybe 2 pages. It's not the most exciting stuff, but it's everything about his game just leads to winning basketball.
And, the defense obviously is a strength. Him and Debansa, both 6'9", but you said it with Boozer, 250 pounds, stockier guy, has played a lot of center, it seems like, in high school thus far. Do you envision him playing center at the next level, or do you think it's something where he scales more towards the 4 or possibly even the wing in some lineups?
Yeah, and at Duke, I imagine he'll probably still play some center, but also scale down to 4 long term. I don't think he's quite big enough to play full-time 5. I don't think he's quite explosive enough to be a team's primary rim protector. In some lineups he's strong enough where he can still control the paint on rebounds and stuff. And I'm sure in some lineups the teams can go small with him at the 5 for at least some stretches. But I think ideally you want him at the 4. I think he moves his feet well enough in space, really physical, bumping guys off drives without fouling, really disciplined, rarely. I'm not sure I've ever seen him get in foul trouble, maybe 1 or 2 games here or there. But the fundamentals, the IQ, the awareness, it's all exactly where it needs. It's well ahead of where it typically is for guys his age. And it allows him to operate in space a little more effectively because he's anticipating where ball handlers are going and then knows exactly how athletic and strong he is and utilizes that perfectly.
And the strengths on the defensive end of the floor, those are a big part of the sell with Cam Boozer. Offensively, if he's going to play the 4, or let's start with just what he's been doing really well in high school. For Nets fans who haven't watched him, is he a guy who's posting up? Is he a roll man? Is he a guy who can do things off the dribble or spotting up? All of the above? What have been the main strengths and the go-to aspects of his game thus far?
It's A little bit of everything, honestly. As a junior, there's a lot of bully ball stuff, like just being bigger than everyone. Because when you're 6'9", 250, as a junior, you're going to get whatever you want around the rim. Awesome offensive rebounder, really good post game, good scoring touch. And then this year, we saw a lot more pick and pop stuff, spotting up, creating out of the short roll. I thought his passing reads took a big jump this year. Again, not as a primary guy, but as, a guy who can create out of the short roll, out of, make that skip pass when the double comes, that kind of stuff. Some people on the No Ceilings team are a little more optimistic about the ball handling and the wiggle and the shot creation. I'm not quite there yet with it. I just need to see a little more, and I see him a little more as like an elite play finisher. And tertiary facilitator, but the play finishing versatility took a huge leap this year. And then as that shot continues to progress like it has been, the closeouts are only going to get longer, and his handle and physicality is good enough where he can attack closeouts, get downhill to either finish through contact or kick out to a teammate.
And if this is a guy who defensively has the size, has the understanding of positioning, is going to be a force on that end, is a good spot up shooter and play finisher, can do those things, that would lend itself, obviously, you think, to a very high floor as a guy at the next level. The ceiling oftentimes for these guys who aren't like true big men, even sometimes for big men also, is dependent on the things you said, the wiggle, the shot creation, being able to put the ball on the floor and create off script. So, if you're not that convinced of that, obviously he has, a long way to go as a prospect, but is he kind of one of the guys you could see as a little bit higher floor, but maybe the ceiling's capped somewhat because of those limitations?
Yeah, and I'm pretty confident that he'll play 15 years plus in the league. Just he has that game, and more importantly, and the physical tools are all there, but mentally, it's so advanced. Just the way that he processes the game, sees the floor, maps it, and just reads and reacts to everything. And he's rarely flustered. The composure is through the roof, and just the awareness and knowing where to be when he needs to be there. It's really special for this stage of his game. The ceiling is I would say lower than Darren and AJ, but he almost certainly has the highest floor of the three.
Do you have a player comp? Do you have any guys who you could see him growing in a similar mold to thus far, or is he kind of just unique in that aspect?
Al Horford is one that I really like. Again, he's a guy who 6'9", 6'10", so not the biggest guy, and has played almost 15 to 20 years as a center, but also has that ability to space the floor. Some years better than others, but just a really smart player on both ends of the floor, and that's the one I've kind of been going to for Boozer the most. There's also like some Kevin Love, some Paul Millsap plus type stuff there too.
And that's interesting, because the Nets just made a draft where it seems like high feel, guys who had a really solid understanding of the game was a big emphasis there. And I think the Nets would be, jumping for joy to get any of these guys, but, maybe that draws them to a guy like Boozer. We'll see. It's really early to tell, but Tyler, great job, introing the class. Nets fans, I'm sure, are just going to be consuming all of the draft content leading up to this 2026 draft. So if you guys don't already, go follow Tyler's stuff on No Ceilings and on the Locked On NBA Draft Show. We're going to have tons more coverage throughout the season. So we'll have to have you on a few more times and check in, but I appreciate you taking the time. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys really enjoyed the talk with Tyler, introing that 2026 class. If you guys do not already, go follow their work on No Ceilings and the Locked On NBA Draft Show. They have great content out already on these guys, and they'll have much more throughout the year. But if you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm asking you right now, take a second, smash that like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about these 2026 draft prospects. Any of it really helps for engagement in the algorithm as I try to grow the channel. But we got training camp about a week away, media day less than a week away. We got a lot more news, Nets trades, signings, all this expected. I'll have coverage of all that and more here on Locked On Nets when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.